You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Mansell.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And I mean, already, we got Ted joining us. Happy Star Wars, everyone. So we want to welcome Ted. We want to welcome all of you to our show tonight, because this is the first time in a long time that we're not doing Skeleton Crew related stuff. No reviews, none of that. This is like a different kind of show. Although we did do a show outlining all of the Star Wars projects coming out in 2025 not too long ago. This time, we're actually going to tackle something that I actually think is going to spark a nice, healthy discussion. I hope a lot of people are watching the live broadcast this time. You know, if it's only our usual few, I don't know. We'll have to see. But even amongst you and I, this is going to be a good one, because it started out where we're talking about Ryan Gosling being attached to this Star Wars project now that, what's the guy's name? Shawn Levy or something?
Shawn Levy.
Yeah, it's the guy that did Deadpool.
Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yep. So it's interesting that he actually is now attached to somebody. I swear, every time that we turn around, it seems like there's...
I know you're going to say it.
Well, it just... So you have the people that are announced, right? And the people that we thought were making Star Wars projects, and then all of a sudden, there's no really big announcement. They just casually go, oh yeah, well this guy's, attached to this, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. When was this guy making a Star Wars movie? Right. And what's that one about? Like, we get and they just drop it so casually. But this actually led me to think that, is it really necessary to have name actors in Star Wars? Because when it started out, sure, you had Alec Guinness as Ben Kenobi in the original, but everybody else is pretty much unknown. And in fact, like Harrison Ford, that's basically what launched his career. And then, you went with that for a while. And then, of course, when they did the prequel trilogy, yeah, you had Natalie Portman, you had Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor. These guys, to various degrees, were name actors. But then you also had newcomers. Hayden Christensen was a relative newcomer later on in the prequels. Jake Lloyd had basically done like Jingle All the Way and maybe like one or two other movies or something, but he wasn't really a star. And granted, yeah, you had Jimmy Smits. I mean, actually the prequels probably had Samuel L. Jackson. So there were a number of them, but the prequels were pretty much panned by everybody, though. And so that led people to think, maybe name actors in Star Wars isn't a good idea. And then you flash forward to the sequel trilogy, you have a lot of newcomers. Sure, you had Max von Sydow before he died. You had Adam Driver.
Isaac.
Oscar Isaac was definitely doing some stuff. I wouldn't say that he was like a huge name, right? He wasn't like a Samuel L. Jackson or something, but
right.
But yeah, he did have a name. He was known. But then Daisy Ridley was virtually unknown. John Boyega was unknown. So they sort of went back the other way, and again, it was criticized. And then, of course, you look at the TV shows, one could argue that Jude Law was a really pivotal reason why Skeleton Crew was so popular, even though the kids were amazing. But again, they were relatively unknown too. So it just basically almost spawns this discussion. Do we really need name actors?
Well, I think you don't always need. I'll put it to you this way, and I'm getting this from you.
Uh-oh.
It's what does the story call for? And sometimes it's like, all right, for example, certain characters you may need someone with to pull off the gravitas that you might need for something. So, for example, as we're talking about, and there's, we definitely doing the comparison of, you look at the prequels, had a bunch of, name actors. With the original trilogy, not so much. sequel trilogy, some here and there. But then, like, you could take something like Rogue One. Rogue One had, Mikkelsen. You had um, Felicity uh, Jones. Is that
Yeah.
Felicity Jones? No, yeah, Felicity Jones. You had what's his face? Um,
Well, Alan Tudyk, even though he was the voice of
well, you still,
K2SO,
yeah,
he
yeah,
was
Alan Tudyk,
he
but
was
then you
pretty
also
known.
had
Yeah.
um, Forrest Whitaker. So you had some names in there. Ben Mendelsohn,
Hmm.
another one. So you've had some people in there um, who can carry a movie, of their own. So and I mean not Andor, but Rogue One was awesome. So I think it just depends on the story you're trying to tell, what kind of characters do you need in order to pull off certain things, and then um, what's the story
All right. Well,
overall?
that should do it for tonight's show.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. Well, no, and I would agree with that. But see, here's the reason why I put that question out there to everybody. It's because the problem with using a name actor, and this is something that was concerning George Lucas a lot when he was making this
Hmm.
stuff. It's the reason why he specifically went after people who were pretty unknown. The problem is when you have a name actor, now you don't see them as their character, you see the actor. It's
Hmm.
like, because that was a big issue. Like, Leonardo DiCaprio really wanted to be in The Phantom Menace. Or no, it was Attack of the Clones. But at first he wanted to be in The Phantom Menace. Then he wanted to play the older Anakin. Like, he was really lobbying for that. And Lucas was just like, look, the problem is, especially at that time, because Titanic had just hit, it's like,
Hmm.
look, if I put you in this movie, nobody's going to see Anakin Skywalker. They're going to see DiCaprio. And that's the problem, is that name actors, especially if they're popular enough, they bring some of that extra baggage. You talk about somebody like Samuel L. Jackson, he's more of a character actor. There's a lot of these guys that aren't necessarily either attached to their own stardom or they're not attached to a specific character. That's one of the reasons why, here comes the Star Trek reference, but when William Shatner tried to get other work, people couldn't see past Captain Kirk.
Yeah, but I think that's just because that was mainly what he had done, and I think, but see, it's kind of weird because, like, you got someone like Liam Neeson, who was in there. You have, um, like you said, Sam Jackson, who are powerhouses, and at the time, like, Leo DiCaprio, although Titanic was probably by far his biggest movie, especially at that time. Um, but he still was in stuff like Romeo and Juliet. Like he had been doing some other stuff, and I think he probably could have made it. But my thing is that sometimes, and I won't even say the as good as those actors are, they couldn't save Phantom Menace from
Well,
being
yeah.
a bad
I
movie
mean,
because it was just poorly executed. You see what I'm saying? So that's my point is that yeah, you could take something like you can juxtapose or compare like Phantom Menace to Rogue One. They have almost the same amount of stars in that, but one was widely successful than the other and beloved because it just executed better. So do I think Star Wars needs to have it? No, because it's proven before that it doesn't need it. But and the only thing I don't want to happen is that they are using it to draw money,
hmm
like almost like clickbait. I don't want it to be that type of thing where it's like, oh look, um, Dwayne the Rock Johnson is going to be in Star Wars, everybody's gonna rush to go see it because ooh, it's The Rock, and it's like no, we don't need The Rock to be in Star Wars unless there's a legitimate reason for him to be in Star Wars. You know what I mean? So that's just my thing. It's I or we're gonna have, and my thing is with Ryan Gosling, all right? That because that's kind of where this kind of all spawned from. Like, okay, he was widely loved as Ken from the Barbie movie, so now okay, that's catapulted him.
All right. So I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. We just had to find Daryl. Something basically happened. We're trying to see if Daryl can get back. And then I'll give him time to get back. I'll basically... I guess there's like a high wind advisory that's happening right now. So I think the weather might be knocking out our stream. So we'll just have to see. Let me see if I can get Daryl back really quick. And then I'll go on with some of my thoughts. And then we actually have a chat. We have a new person chatting in, which is cool. And I want to get that on here. So let me get that on there right now. So we have somebody new, Universal. Universal says, hello, Eric and Daryl. Well, right now, just Eric, because there he is.
Okay.
There you are. All right. Yeah, I think there was like a high wind. There's like a high wind advisory that's out right now. So I think it might have like knocked something out. But we're back. We're back on the same stream, so I think we're good. And we got our audience back. And we have a new person, Universal. Universal has a bunch of chats in there right now.
Okay.
So another one is, my answer to your question is, depends on how much they get paid. He goes on to say, Jude Law was paid $500,000 per episode.
Sheesh.
Yeah, I know, right? And then, did Jude Law get people to watch Skeleton Crew? Answer is no. Skeleton Crew had the all-time lowest viewership of all live-action Disney Plus Star Wars shows. Now, I know that was true for the first 2 episodes, but I'm curious on if the whole series was like that. Because a lot of people were talking about that, but it turned out that those numbers were actually for the first 2 episodes. It wasn't for the whole series. And then he goes on to say, when they created Harrison, Carrie, and Mark, only Mark was unknown. Yeah, I mean, that's true, because Harrison did do All-American Graffiti. Carrie Fisher, obviously, she was famous because she was,
comedian,
kid of Debbie Reynolds, and I forgot who her father was. But yeah, Mark was really the only really unknown one. David Prowse, you can argue, was unknown, but it didn't matter because he was in a suit. But the only true marquee name on the original Star Wars was Alec Guinness. That was the one that...
That one and...
Oh, Peter Cushing.
Peter Cushing, thank you.
Yeah, Peter Cushing was...
Yes.
Pretty famous too. But that's a good point too that Universal brings up, right? Is that, okay, they pay this money. Are they getting the ROI? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it... Yeah. Do you really want to spend that kind of money if it's not really going to increase viewership?
Well, I think part of and this is kind of a difficult question to analyze, just only because of the variables that are going on. So, like for Universal, who makes a valid point about okay, Skeleton Crew was the lowest. However, is it the lowest because people didn't like the show, or were people already so turned off from Acolyte that they weren't even going to be bothered to watch the show because they were so disinterested because everything else Star Wars has been putting out as of late has been crap? So,
well, there is that, but there's also another thing that you brought up on our last review, and that is that Skeleton Crew is marketed towards kids.
True.
It's Goonies meets Star Wars. I mean, it's just not the type of show that's going to appeal to everybody. Mm-hmm. That's another big thing too.
For the mass, mass Star Wars populace, correct? Because most of us are adults you know, more than likely in our 30s and up. So though that's not really going to apply to more people, to a lot of people in that age bracket because it's like, okay, especially if you don't have kids, or your kids are grown, you're just like, okay, I don't want to see a bunch of little kids running around.
Yeah, I mean, just the big adventure thing. Now, it turns out that, you watch the thing, and it turned out to
Oh,
be an
it's
amazing show, and
amazing show.
it does appeal to people, but the thing is, the marketing, though, wasn't really directed towards a really wide age group. And then, like you said, I think The Acolyte was somewhat of the final straw because that was a movie series that was purported to be something that it wasn't. If you look at all the marketing leading up to it, it's going to be a lot of Sith training. It's going to be, focus. I mean, there was just a lot of, besides making the argument of the quality of the writing, the directing, all that stuff, it also just wasn't what they had initially promised us, or at least made it sound. So from that standpoint, you got to look at that too. So these are all good points, right? Because you don't know. I mean, it's like, well, what necessarily drives a successful Star Wars project? That's the next thing that you look at.
And that's why I say I think, for a lot of different things, I think Star Wars has gotten to the point now, and this is where it becomes slightly dangerous, is because now you're going to have to use star power to get people to come to the theaters when Star Wars, the name Star Wars itself, was its own star power. Right?
Yeah.
So now we may have to get bigger name actors to do a Star Wars film to make people want to come see it. And then, but now when people come to see it, it has to be good.
Well, that's
because then now, if it's not good, now not only are you further hurting the Star Wars brand, but now you're hurting depending on who you get, you could be hurting the careers of some of these actors or actresses because you got someone established like Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah, that's not going to bother him because this guy's a legend. So yeah, he's secure. But what I'm saying is, like, you take somebody like even a Ryan Gosling, like, okay, even though he's got a few good movies under his belt, he's not, at least not in my opinion, he wouldn't be what I would call I wouldn't put him up there with the untouchable actors, like a Liam Neeson at this point. Or
yeah, you mean somebody that would actually save the franchise. Like, you bring this guy in basically not just for marquee value, but also just the quality of the acting. And
not only that, but if he gets burned by it, it's not going to, like, if Liam Neeson came back and did another Star Wars film, for example, and it sucked, it's not going to hurt his career because he has so much that has preceded that he can stand, he can take a hit. Whereas somebody like Ryan Gosling, he doesn't have the catalog that Liam Neeson has. So a bad movie, especially in a Star Wars franchise, it's like, ooh, that might scuff up his newly minted fame as he's gotten so far. So I don't know.
Well, Universal says Nielsen numbers have confirmed weeks 1 through 4 are lowest viewed. Nielsen is a month behind. Luminate and Variety are current and have both confirmed all 8 episodes are the lowest viewed.
Wow.
And again, it's sad, but it doesn't surprise me. And it doesn't surprise me simply because they have made so many missteps.
And we were saying a while ago.
I mean, it was only a matter of time before the Star Wars name can only get you so far, and it's like, and the other problem is, like I said, I think coupled with the fact that this had a little bit more of a niche audience, it wasn't really marketed to every Star Wars fan. I think every Star Wars fan, if they watched it, could definitely find enjoyment in it. I mean, when we reviewed it, we're kind of like, other than Andor and the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, it's like the best Star Wars project. Right. And it's just too bad. Universal also says, unfortunately, the Star Wars brand is in peril. Andor was lowest viewed show, then it was The Acolyte, and now it's Skeleton Crew. This is a downtrend pattern with the last 3 projects consecutively. Yeah, I mean, let's see, Ahsoka season 1. I almost said season 2. I know that wasn't, but then again, it had a lot of familiarity of characters, and that's another thing that I think hurt both The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew. Even if The Acolyte had been an amazing show, it wouldn't have mattered because here's the problem as I see it. And you and I have talked about this a lot during many of our shows. Okay,
Right.
The big problem is where Lucasfilm is making a big mistake, in my opinion anyway, is they're going all in on the casual fan. And that's the biggest mistake because they keep trying to go after the elusive casual fan when you have all these hardcore fans who could easily drive the marketing and all that other stuff because you have multiple generations of fans at this point.
Yeah, the casual fans, I mean, I won't say they're not, but I'm just saying, if you're, just take a look at Celebration. That's not the casual fan.
Yeah, right.
The casual fan is not spending all that money to go to Celebration.
Right. You know,
Sorry,
like shaking like plastic lightsabers in the air and all that. You're right. That's
just
not
the money that it
casual.
takes to go. I mean, when we
That
looked at
too.
the prices, that's what I'm saying. Like the flight that you need to get there, then of course you got to get the hotel, and then on top of that, you want to go to all these different events. Each one of those little panel discussions, you know, that costs money. So
A lot of money.
if you're a lot of money, so that's what I'm saying. Like if you are a casual fan, you're not putting that much money into something that you just casually watch. I know I wouldn't.
Oh,
So that's what I'm saying. So when you look at Celebration, it's like, okay, this is your audience. This is who you really need to satisfy. And you know, there's tons of people. Not only that, but then there are the people who are watching Celebration like us because we couldn't be there. We can't afford to go. Right? Again, it's a time thing. Casual fans aren't going to spend, you know, log in. They so a few may casually have it in the background or something like that.
Right.
But like we're actually like no sitting down watching it like it's
yeah,
Steve
like
Jobs
for 5 hours a day or whatever.
yeah, like Steve
Exactly.
Jobs is, you know, dropping a new iPhone or something like that. And we're trying to figure out all the new features, like, and we're combing the internet trying to find, who took a, you know, illegal video of the trailer for something movie where, you know, that's coming. You know, like
Which we actually, I think one of them, maybe it was a Book of Boba Fett. It was one of them that's what we used to review the trailer
yeah,
because nobody released it. So it was
Exactly.
like we had to. No, I think it was Ahsoka. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, these are the people that they need to start marketing things toward.
exactly. And so my thing is like, why would you have a show, not a show, but a whole theme, Star Wars Celebration? Why would you have an event like that and cater to the casual fan? That makes no sense to me.
No, but I think the problem is, and this is what they don't understand inherently, right? Is that Lucas didn't care about any of this stuff.
That too.
When he was in charge of it, he was making movies for himself. I mean, he said that as much in numerous interviews, right?
Yep.
He made them for him. If other people liked it, great. He was using very timeless themes. I mean, we've gone over and over. If you guys want to, you know, see our opinions on what Star Wars is and why it became what it became, we had that whole What is Star Wars series, you know, go back in the playlist or whatever. We do like a show on that, and then we review every single one of the films, right? So I don't want to repeat that here right now, but for the sake of people that maybe, you know, were watching us back then, yeah, we go over it ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
But the point being is that the reason why it was so successful was because Lucas hit on these timeless themes, great storytelling, you know, just like crazy good effects that were what's a word?
Groundbreaking.
Yeah, that's it. It's like I blanked. It was weird. Yeah, like these groundbreaking effects, and each time they were always ahead of the curve that way, right? No matter when they were making these movies. And so that was a reason why people were pouring billions of dollars into it. And then, of course, you have all the world building. You have the comics. You have the novels. You have, you know, some of the animated shows that were coming out at that time. So by the time the sequel trilogy hit, you had this massive audience that was just totally hungry for it because Lucas stopped making it for 10 years. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to sell it. Everybody was all excited when Disney took it over because we all mistakenly thought that that was a good idea.
Right.
You know, I thought, oh,
Me
well,
too.
yeah, they're the perfect studio to do this. Especially after what they did with Marvel. I figured, okay, cool. Now this is going to happen. J.J. Abrams gets signed on. I looked at what he did with the Star Trek reboot, which I loved. I'm like, oh, man. And he wasn't even a Star Trek fan. He was more into Star Wars. So I'm like, imagine what this guy's going to do with something he's truly a fan of if he did such a great job on that reboot and he wasn't even a fan of the show. Yep. So you had all this stuff in place, but the mistake, and this is where they dropped the ball. When Kathleen Kennedy started wanting to manufacture a $1 billion franchise and expand it and make it bigger. And so what ends up happening is it's like, well, I don't just want these like little geeky Star Wars fans that we already have. I want to reach a bigger audience. See, she wanted to do like what Marvel did because Marvel had the comic book fans, but then, you know, everybody just started liking them. But the reason why was because what Marvel did in the early days, which they've even dropped the ball and now they're paying the price, is they basically made real movies. Like they were just, if you stripped all the comic book stuff out of the early Marvel movies, they would just stand on their own as normal movies. Because they were real, you know, cinematic movies. That's what was so funny to me about that whole Martin Scorsese comment. You know, it was like, no, dude, when they started out, it really was real cinema. At least, you know, of course, sure, you had the explosions and stuff, but if you look at, you know, the first 2 or 3 Marvel movies are like, take all of phase 1. Okay, after they got into phase 2, it started to be like the Transformers. You know, it became super over the top. You had just like this, you know, all this destruction stuff. And I mean, even through phase 2, I thought they still maintained a lot of the story. That's when you got like Civil War. That's when you got, you know, the whole, hey, well, what about these superheroes taking responsibility for their actions and the government? I thought that was cool. Yeah. And that actually followed that storyline, you know, from the comics. But the thing is, with Star Wars, they just were trying to market it and make it bigger and capture like this general populace.
Well, that's the thing, and I agree with everything you're saying, Eric. I want to add that, you know, when you compare Marvel to, it's like, for me, growing up, I can't say for you because, of course, you know, 2 different eras. However, for my era, growing up, like, Marvel has been around since forever. So, like, you're getting, like, comic books, like, from I'll even just say the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way down, right? And Star Wars comes out in 77, all right? And not everybody in the world is into science fiction or science fantasy. But more people were always into superheroes. Like, you know, for Halloween, for example, you know, no one is running around, like around my era, no one was running around talking about, oh, I want to be a Jedi for Halloween. Why? Because Star Wars ended in 83 with Return of the Jedi. So I was born in 84. So unless you had the tapes or saw it on TV, and then there was no merchandise for that in the stores where you can just go out and be a Jedi or Darth Vader or anything like that, like in your time period. But there's always Wolverine, there's always Batman, there's always Superman, there's always like those characters are forever. So Marvel has a wider appeal than Star Wars does. However, the thing is that's why I said, like, you know, so Marvel can kind of stand on its own like that, and so can Star Wars if you keep it with the hardcores. Like you said, Kathleen Kennedy tried to manufacture this thing, and she's trying to grow it to the point of a Marvel thing. But my thing is like Marvel only became that way. It was because of the stories that it told, and that's what made it interesting.
Well,
And
not
that's
only
the part
that,
that she's not keeping up with is the storytelling. You're trying to bring on this woke agenda into this stuff and stuff that's not that doesn't belong in Star Wars. You're tainting the recipe, and
hmm
now you and I were talking about earlier. We were watching the old commercial and we saw one for Hawaiian Punch, and I was just like, Hawaiian Punch doesn't taste as good as it did back then. It's like, I'm not trying to say I'm just I have a yes, I have more mature palate now that I'm 40, but and I'm not 8 years old. However, like the formula was fine. Like change the packaging of it, but keep the same recipe because it was actually good back. It tasted better back then.
well,
And that's the
people
thing.
they'll innovate for innovation's sake, right?
Exactly. And that's the problem. And that's why I feel like now you're getting to the point now where something was able to stand by itself just off the name. It's like, ooh, Star Wars is coming out. You know, let's run to the theater and let's see what's going on.
Yeah,
Now you have to put all these mainstream actors in there just to make people go like, well, okay, well, so and so was in this, so and so was in it. Well, it must be good because I like their movies anyway, so I want to see what they would do in the Star Wars. I'm just curious. Somehow it's out of curiosity instead of being a fan. It's like, okay, I'm just curious to see why this person signed on to do a Star Wars movie.
Well, and the telling thing too is that now as a fan, you're just kind of like, oh man, please don't suck. Please don't suck.
Exactly.
Like before every single project now.
Exactly.
I mean, it just amazes me. There
Absolutely.
was a time where Star Wars was so invincible. It was like nothing could take it down, right? I mean, it just blows my mind to actually get to that point. It's like you
Hmm.
just, you grow up for 30, 40 years as I have, and Star Wars, it could withstand virtually anything. And it just, oh, it's nuts. All right, Universal says the Star Wars brand needs a pause right now. My strong suggestion is to have only one project a year. Less is more. Totally agree. David joins us again. Hello, gentlemen. It's Star Wars Day. Sorry I'm late. Well, we'll let it go this time.
Yes. We're going to vaporize you now. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, at least that time that you co-hosted with us, at least you were on time then.
Oh, yeah.
For our Thanksgiving show. If you guys missed it, every year we always do a Thanksgiving show, and because David's been a paying member of our Buy Me a Coffee thing, one of the things at his level was you get to co-host the show with us. So he did on Thanksgiving. It was a lot of fun, so we got to do it again. In fact, if there's ever a time that you can't do it, I might pull him in and have him co-host, which would actually change the dynamics of the show. but
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it just the frustrating part is not only have they been making these substandard projects for years now,
Hmm.
but it's gotten to the point where even hardcore fans like us are just approaching each of these projects with extreme trepidation. Now, I had hope for Skeleton Crew, but again, I had to watch like 3 episodes before I was secure, like, okay, this is going to be good. When
Yeah.
Andor Season 2 comes out, I'm not worried about that at all. Like,
Yeah. Well,
that
see,
one
the
I'm
thing,
sure is going to be really good.
my grandmother years ago used to love to fly. When it came to travel, she had no problems flying until one incident happened while she was on the plane where um, I guess they hit some turbulence and they had to drop down really quick to get away from the turbulence or something. And, it freaked her out. So now she can't fly. Everything has to be like okay on the ground. And I told that story only to say like that's kind of how we are as Star Wars fans. It's like it's taking granted it's not just one, but it's taking enough bad incidents to now we're like terrified of flying now, or we're terrified of watching Star Wars. Where once
Yeah.
at once it's like when we get in. So I'll put it to you this way: when using the same plane analogy, most of us who love to fly or who travel, we'll get on the plane, we'll find our seat, we'll put our luggage on the the bin, have a seat, pull out our phones or a device or whatever, and watch something that we've downloaded or whatever, and just wait to land. We're not asking who's flying the plane, how many hours of flight have they had, what was their, what was their GPA in flight school. We're not asking all these questions because we just haphazardly just sit down and we just trust the pilot, right? Now we can't trust the pilot of Star Wars. We can't trust that, like, okay, you know what? Every time I got on the plane with you, it's been a little shaky. So I need to know, like, is this person certified? Has this person been clear? Like, now we're not looking at the directors simply because, oh, we just want to see who's doing the movie. Yeah, sure. But we're checking, like, okay, what movies have they done?
Yeah,
Have they been
exactly.
successful? How much money did it make? What are other actors saying about this direct? Like, we're doing all this extensive research because now we don't trust the brand as much anymore.
Well, but I
And
think a
that's
lot of
the
that's the
unfortunate part
micro.
we've come to.
Well, yeah, but it's a micromanagement thing. Because remember, Colin
Yeah.
Trevorrow was supposed to do The Rise of Skywalker. It was going to be called Duel of the Fates. Well, Kathleen Kennedy was like, hey, your last movie didn't do so good, so we're going to remove you from that. So it could be. Now, these next two are kind of fun. Well, this next one from Universal is not funny. But the text after that, considering what you just talked about, is hilarious. So first, Universal says the ideology within the industry has now changed. Wokeness is now not written to the new scripts. Unfortunately, woke projects in the queue will be released this year and next. So that's a good point, is that we got to flush out the rest, and then hopefully it'll start to get back on track. But the funny thing now is, oh, flight is landing now. See you both again in the future. God bless. You were just talking about planes.
Right.
All right, Universal. Yeah, come back and, hey, go back and watch the rest of the show, actually, when you get a chance. Yeah, it's always nice when, of course, we love all the people that chat in all the time. David, Ronaldo, Voyager, and just like all kinds of people, right, that have been with us through the years, and we appreciate every one of them. But we also like it when new people come in and chat. That's always cool because, again, got to build up the subscribers, build up the watch hours so we can grow this channel. But yeah, I agree. I think that ultimately, and this is where things become, I think, somewhat of an issue, is the fact that on one hand, I think Lucasfilm has gotten so sensitive because they've had so many of these failures now. And by that, it's not even always viewership failures. Don't forget, the sequel trilogy made billions of dollars. I mean, it's in like the top movies of all time. So, I mean, from a box office standpoint, they're not really failures. I mean, Solo is the only one that by Star Wars standards didn't live up to what was anticipated. Rogue One certainly did. So you have the issue of television. And I always said that Star Wars on television is something that I still think they're figuring out. I don't think all of it is due to everything that's been going on. I think they're still trying to figure out how Star Wars works on television. Obviously, you have things like Andor, the first couple of seasons of The Mandalorian, now Skeleton Crew, where, hey, this is a template you guys can use. You want to know how Star Wars works on television? This is how it works on television. So I'm not saying that everything should copy that, but they need to take the writing, directing, the acting, everything about it into consideration and use that as a template, much the same way as the movies have had a template.
Yeah, I just feel like, when it comes to just I'll tell a lot of things, like Universal said, less is more sometimes. And I think when you're trying to uh like a lot of us tell our kids, you know, do something you love, not something that's going to make you money.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do it because you love, the money's going to will find you because you're good at what you do.
Right.
And this is a prime example. Is that, like, I feel like Kathleen Kennedy lost sight of the reason why George Lucas made these movies, because, and that's why I say, it's she doesn't have that part. She doesn't have that, like I want to make quality stuff because I just love telling stories because George is a filmmaker. That's what he does. That's his purpose in life, right? Kathleen, you're about business. So you're just thinking about like, okay, you're looking at the bottom dollar, and yeah, the sequel trilogies did well because we were all thirsty because, like you said, it had been 10 years since we saw Star Wars in the
Exactly.
theater. So of course, everybody, in good or bad, is like, okay, we're just hungry for this stuff. So let's see what Star Wars looks like 10 years later with newer technology, all this type of stuff. Now, and then we gave it a shot. Okay, Force Awakens did well. Last Jedi, not so much. Rise of Skywalker, some people love it, some people don't. It was kind of, topsy turvy on that one. But then you start having projects like, okay, Rogue One pops up. Okay, super. It was sweet. It was good. Well done. You had Solo. Solo was good. The problem with Disney is that they did a horrible job marketing the movie. If they would have marketed it well, Solo would have been a box office success.
Well, here's the other thing I think they should have done too, because Solo was, they were trying to do a thing to where like every other year would be the franchise movies or the saga films, I should say, and then on the off years you would get these standalone stories. So you had, basically The Force Awakens, and you had Rogue One. Then you had The Last Jedi, then you had Solo. The idea was you would have gotten Rise of Skywalker, and then whatever the next one, probably Boba Fett or Obi-Wan.
Right.
One of those is rumored to be the next standalone thing. But what happened is you and I talked about a lot during some of our previous shows, is that The Last Jedi created such a toxic fan environment that when Solo came out just a mere like 5 months or something after The Last Jedi, people still had a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, it was too soon.
It was too soon. And then coupled with the fact, like you had pointed out, that the marketing just wasn't there for it either.
Yeah.
So it wasn't properly marketed, and it came too soon after the movie that began the divide. Like, if Solo had been the next movie, like if it had come out in December of that year, I think it would have done better.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, I think people were kind of like freaked out because you ruined the greatest hero in the Star Wars franchise. In the
Yeah,
Last
that was
Jedi.
another.
Like
that was a
like
bad move.
let's not overlook that. Like the guy, that's like you screwing up Superman or Batman. Like you ruined like the greatest hero in the Star Wars franchise. Probably next to, like, the only one would be worse than that would have been Yoda. Like if you would have did something bad with
Arguably,
Yoda, and like I'm saying, like
I don't know, man. I mean, I get what you're saying, because here's the other problem too. You also had the actor that played him that was saying, "Oh, I don't think this is going to work at all."
Yeah, and boy, was he right.
He was right. He was right.
But the thing is that so now you're going to do another film right after that of another beloved character.
Yeah.
Han Solo.
Yeah.
Now
that's
everybody's. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. That was not the character. Well, first of all, in a way, it probably made sense to do that because people were still reeling from the fact that they killed off Solo in The Force Awakens. And this is a way to actually have him. Yeah.
Anyway.
Right. And we know that. I mean, he wanted to die in Empire Strikes Back, actually. He was tweaked that he had to come back for Return of the Jedi. I mean, it was amazing he came back at all. And then when he came back again in The Rise of Skywalker, I'm like, okay, what do they have on him?
His kid's like in the basement.
Right, exactly. It's like, there's something more going on here because, then they bring him out to Celebration, and he actually enjoyed that, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But that's because a lot of it, I don't think he realizes just how beloved, his character is and the impact it's had. So in a way, when they made Solo, it was a way to bring that character back to life. But yeah, exactly.
But see, then now everybody see the thing that had everybody worried was, okay, who's gonna play? Who's gonna be good as Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
And can he really deliver like a real Han Solo? And that, because of the failure at the cave, the failure in The Last Jedi happened with Luke Skywalker. People are just like, let's leave our favorite people alone now.
Well, not only that, but it's something. This is something that you and I have talked about a lot as well, is the fact that as good as that movie was, it's also a movie that we really didn't need. And I think that was another thing that people were like, okay,
this was fun.
Yeah, cool, I really don't know if I. Well, I mean, even going to see it. See, I think a lot of people avoid seeing it. Number one, because of The Last Jedi thing that we've been talking about. So there's a toxicity factor. But then you also have to factor in the heck do I care? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, and it goes back to something you said at the beginning of the show before, our our feed just started freezing and going crazy. And that is that by and large, okay, people, it's kind of weird. You had this once bulletproof thing that if it just had the name Star Wars on it, people would flock to the theater to see it in droves. 100%. Now, you're at the point, and again, that's not where we're at now. We're at a much worse place now. But at that point, you were at you know what? Don't know if I really care. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that they mishandled the main characters in The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's...
Now, let me get this thing in from David, because it's sort of... I mean, it's not like we're really off topic. I mean, really, there is no such thing in this show, but it does sort of bring things back a little bit. He says they don't need a big name. They need better casting. That's something we were saying earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The Matrix, The Dark Knight, A Few Good Men, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and A Different World are examples of great casting. And go back to the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
There was a chemistry there that actually worked. Go back to even recently with Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew had amazing casting.
Yeah. Amazing casting and amazing chemistry.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing.
But the chemistry goes hand in hand with the casting, because that's one of the big jobs that a casting director has is, how many times have you heard an actor lost a part because he didn't have chemistry with the co-star? And they're like, nope, you're a great actor, but, sometimes you put two great actors together, there's no chemistry. It's like when they used to build these super groups out of these bands, they'd get, okay,
bands,
here's the best, drummer, guitar player, keyboard, whatever. Okay, well, there's no chemistry there. It's just, amazing players, but there's no chemistry. Or even going out on a date, right? I mean, you might meet somebody who's absolutely wonderful, best woman in the world or whatever, but, you don't have any chemistry, it's not going to work out. And so definitely with acting, it's like that.
100%. Yeah, and I think that, to David's point, yes, the casting is what needs that, and the storytelling. Like, those two have to go hand in hand, because you got to have people who have the chops, like, as David would like to say, people who want to come to work and act, people who want to actually, but then you also have to, so there's that three-headed monster, like we always talk about, or the Hydra, if we're doing a Marvel thing. But you got the Hydra of, you got to have great acting, great directing, and great story.
Mm-hmm.
Got those three, you're cooking with gas, as my grandmother would say. But, that's the thing, is sometimes they will have one out of the three.
Right.
Or two out of the three. And
a lot of times it's two out of the three.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's two. So like a lot of times you have great actors, and then you have like a great director, but that story.
Well, that's it, because you can. And how many times have you seen that, where you'll have like two actors, and the chemistry is amazing, but the story is horrible?
Yep.
or the writing's bad or, something like that. Great story, but just poorly written or whatever. David says, I can't believe I'm saying this. Even the C-grade show Andor had great chemistry. A little bit of a backhanded compliment on that one.
Right, exactly.
Just wait for season 2. It'll be fine. But, yeah, it's true. It did. It kept you riveted. And that's what any good show with good chemistry is going to do. It's going to keep you wanting. Well, you know what it does? And you can take Han, Luke, and Leia as an example, and 3PO, R2, Chewbacca, all of them. You wanted to return to that world again. You wanted to go back to them. You wanted to see, I want to spend more time with these characters. The original Star Wars, A New Hope ends. You're like, man, I love this movie so much, a lot because of the interaction of these characters, the chemistry that the characters and the actors and everything had together. You want to revisit that.
Yeah, oftentimes we say, like, I would love to see another series with this person.
Yep.
Because continue their adventures because they're compelling. And that's what you have to have. You want to compel, people to come. And
see, that's what makes Star Wars so great, is the fact that a lot of shows might have one really standout character, and you're like, ooh, I would love to see, when this show ends, maybe they do a spinoff with this character or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have some shows, some films, where like multiple characters are amazing, and the chemistry is there. And so that's what keeps you absolutely absorbed in the world, to the point of, that's why the novels were so, because the characters were so well written and the chemistry on screen was executed so flawlessly that when you read it in your mind while you were reading those Star Wars books, you're thinking of Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, Anthony Daniels. Like, you're thinking of them as these characters.
And you're reading it almost in their voice when you're reading.
Right. And basically, when you're reading that stuff, you're thinking of their interaction and that chemistry that was there. And that translates to the page. The author, of course, is doing a good job.
Yeah, and that's, but once again, that's still, even in that though, you're still using that three-headed, thing, because you have great characters, whether you're in a film or in a novel, then you still have a great director, which will be an author, who are basically, and then they're telling a great story. So you still have to have those elements, and so that's why I say, sometimes the name actors, yeah, it just depends. That's why I said on the onset, like, it depends on what you're doing with them, because Rogue One, phenomenal. You had a bunch of name actors in that. But then, like, you go to the sequel trilogy, wasn't a whole lot of name actors in that. It was terrible. But then you go to the prequel trilogy that had a bunch of name actors. They were good. But the execution was bad.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everything was bad. I mean, you get these people that are,
so you got to Revenge
some
of the Sith.
Oscar-nominated ones, right? Revenge of the Sith actually was good. That was probably
that felt
the
best.
Yeah,
and that felt like it was like, it felt almost like, when you are properly warmed up to go work out and you're actually competing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's what that was like. Phantom Menace is like, okay, I'm getting in here trying to stretch. I just walked into the gym. I need to stretch. All right. Attack of the Clones was warming up a little bit. All right, now I'm fully warmed up. Now I'm playing the game, and yeah, now it's good.
See, my analogy was going to be like, car in the wintertime, right? Phantom Menace, you just started it up. It's like, okay, Attack of the Clones. Now the engine's warmed up to where it's going to blow hot air, but it's still cold in the car. And then, of course, Revenge of the Sith, it's been running for a while with the heat on, and you get in, and it's like,
now you're toasty.
Now you're nice and toasty. So either analogy, whichever analogy that we just tortured, you can basically probably find some common ground in that. But that's the important thing that I think is missing, and that I really hope that if they're going to go this route of trying to get more name actors and stuff, and I'm not opposed to it, because again, I don't necessarily think that's why the title of the show is the way it is. It's not so much, is name actors a good idea, or is it, is it the end of Star Wars or whatever? It's really more like, is it needed? Because you have examples of having name actors in the projects, and you have no-name actors in the project too.
But I think honestly though, even though like, so I know I'm gonna sound like I'm going back on what I said, but I'm really not.
I'm going to do the Chris Hansen. Well, in the transcript here, you said.
Right. Right. But, or however, I think at this juncture, we may need that just because Star Wars has taken such a hit. You need name actors to bring people out. But my thing is now you need to keep them once you get them, and you can only do that with a great story, great acting, and great directing.
Well, and I'll even go a step further. Right now, a lot of it is going to be from a story perspective. Does a story appeal to you?
Mm-hmm.
But I'll give you a good example, man. Skeleton Crew, one of the main reasons why I was even going to give it a shot was Jude Law.
Jude Law, that's what I'm saying.
As soon as I heard that Jude Law was attached to, because before that, when I knew the premise, like they had said, okay, this is what the premise is, I was like, I don't really know if I really. I mean, I knew we were going to have to watch it because we're a Star Wars show and we got to review the stuff, but I had no interest in it at all. Then I found out Jude Law was attached to it, and that was what piqued my interest. That's when I started going, Jude Law's in it? All right, now I'm curious. Wasn't invested in the story yet, but now I'm curious because it's like, what is it about this project that he signed on to it? Because he's one of those actor guys.
Mm-hmm.
He has a seriously wide range. He's been in a lot of
show.
Right. I mean, you could see actually why he was cast in it, because that character is very demanding, wide range of emotions type of a character. Yeah. So you could see that, okay, you needed somebody, but you could have gotten somebody who had the same acting chops, but just wasn't a name, right? But I have to admit, if it hadn't been for him being attached to it, I wouldn't have even been curious enough to start trying to read more about it. And then, of course, once I saw the first trailer, I was sold.
Yeah, I mean, and then Universal gave us the figures, as far as the viewership. Once again, you kind of have to look at that as where people, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier. I don't think it wasn't viewed because people didn't like it. I think people didn't view it for two reasons. One, because of the Acolyte failure and because of the other failed shows that they've had. And then the other is that it didn't appeal to a wide enough audience because, it's primarily a kid show, whereas, adults, it's like, look, I want to come home and watch something a little bit more, adult friendly, so we say. And I think that's but if they actually watched it, they probably would give it good reviews, even though
I think so, yeah.
It's not for them. It's like, it was a good show. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. It just comes down to, from a story perspective or a project by project basis, is this something you're interested in? I mean, a perfect example is David, right? I mean, Andor's not really the type of Star Wars show that would appeal to him. He wants his Star Wars projects to maybe be a little closer to the more action-packed, Saturday matinee serial Flash Gordon-like thing of the original trilogy.
Right.
Perfectly valid. Other people, it's almost like when we go back, when people talk about the war or the lore, right? Some people like the whole Jedi Sith, the whole mystical angle. Some people like the more war type rebellion versus empire kind of thing. I mean, there's people look for different things, and that's the problem. Star Wars has been out long enough now, and I mean, it's coming up on 50 years old.
Well, and that's another
2 years, man. It's going to be 50 years old since the first one came out.
Well, the thing is, you have to kind of look at it. Also, you were kind of in the ballpark. You know, a lot of people, because when people are introduced to something, kind of like, I think I brought this up to you once before about music. Like when you have an artist that you love, and like let's say they come out with and I'll just use something that's widely popular, someone that's widely popular, like Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson he's a king of pop, but he had, the dance songs, he had the ballads, and just some other little, I don't want to say insignificant songs, but just more a little bit more chill songs, like Human Nature or something, for example. And they're good songs, but that makes up a whole album. And that's what you're used to from Michael. But if Michael did like a whole ballad album, people probably don't want to hear that, because it's like, well, where's the Beat It? Where's the Smooth Criminal? Like, where's
like him,
and they're not,
a band like
they're
Queen, same thing. They want variety on their albums.
They want variety. And so if you're used to, but it's how you're introduced to the artist is what I'm saying.
Well,
a lot of people get fixated on like, well, this is their brand. I don't want to see them deviate from their brand. But then some artists like, well, I want to go in a different direction. I got inspired. I went to a park and saw this, and this inspired me to write this whole album that's completely different than what you're used to hearing from me. And now people are just like, what is this? I don't want to, no, this is trash. This is garbage.
Well, that actually happened to Michael Jackson. There was a lot of people when Thriller came out, they were fans of Off the Wall.
Mm-hmm.
Off the Wall is a different album than Thriller.
Oh, yeah. Off the Wall was more disco based. Yeah,
more disco, a little bit like kind of a soul thing, right? A little smooth.
Exactly.
It's like, you go from like Rock With You to like Beat It.
Yeah, you got all these rock guitars. And,
it's like a little bit darker. It's a little heavier. It's a little bit more guitar driven.
Yeah.
So
now, and I think that's what happens. Like for someone like David, if you are introduced to Star Wars in a certain medium, and this is what you identify as Star Wars, now when you get a show like Andor that doesn't have any of the light, like it's kind of like, where's the? Okay, I guess like it's cool, but you kind of want that. And so when you and I have always talked about, like, yes, Star Wars can go into genres because it's vast enough to do that. However, does the fan base, and I'm not even so much referring now, sure, you might capture casual fans doing that. And I think that's what they were trying to do. However, it's like, again, the hardcores are the ones that's really paying your bills. So do you deviate so far away from your brand, so to speak?
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
Or
I'll tell you why. It's the exact opposite of what you're talking about. Like, I think the hardcore fans would be the ones to do that. The casual fans, that would be death. Because the casual fans aren't familiar enough with the product. You start making like a Star Wars horror movie about a Wampa and Hoth. It's like, people be like, whoa, well, wait a minute. Where does this fit in between? Like, what happened to Rey and Poe? Or, it's like they don't know the franchise well enough. You would need, the hardcore fans are the ones that want the different stuff. And it goes into something else that I was thinking about when you were bringing all these points up. Because it dawned on me, especially when you were talking about David, right? David's a relatively new fan.
Right.
So he has the benefits of all this stuff just being out there, and you can cherry pick.
Mm-hmm.
When I was coming up, and even to a point when you were coming up, it was more of a linear process.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were introduced to these project by project, so you had time to sit with them. Plus, you're getting movies every 3 years, not, 2 movies a year and 4 TV shows and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think Universal probably was right when he was saying, look, maybe they need to slow down a little bit and let people ingest this, but at the same time, all of us hardcores are like, no, because they release like 3 or 4 books a year. We want, especially while these actors are still of the age to do it. Like, how cool would it have been if the original cast had been just making, even if they put them in the can and didn't release them right away, but while they were still in their 30s, make what happens after Return of the Jedi so they're age appropriate. Okay, Ronaldo joins us.
Hey.
He says, hey, everyone, late to the party, but I'll say this. Ryan Gosling in Star Wars would be amazing. Of course. He says, however, will this movie happen? I don't think so. That's actually a good point. That's one. Ronaldo, you get points for that because we didn't even talk about that. And he says, but it does feel more real than other projects because it's the first time we have casting news for new characters. And I will say this because I think that in a lot of ways, this is faring better than the Rey movie. The Rey movie's lost another writer and is getting yet another writer. It's like, I don't know. I don't know about this Rey movie. There's something really, yeah. I'm at the point where they probably need to shelve that thing for a while and figure it out. Yeah. It's great that Daisy Ridley's able to do it, but look, it takes place 15 years after the rise of Skywalker. We still have some time. We're only 6 years away.
And we don't even know what we don't even know what this Ryan Gosling project would be like.
I know.
Is it a comedy? Because that's another thing. It's like, okay.
Oh yeah, what type of movie is it?
Yeah, because once again, this is like, okay. Once again, I think you might have people who you're definitely going to have people who are like, all right, why are we? And I don't think the film era is where that should go. I think that would be more for like a television thing because I think the film should be more of the canon lore type stuff, whereas
maybe
television,
it is.
You can play around with television.
Yeah, I agree. Like some of the
I think it's
weirder
more set up
stuff
for that.
Sure. I mean, there's going to be projects that are either set up for television versus being set up for film. There's other ones where maybe they're a little too experimental and you don't want to, have a film budget and you have to have the lead time and the marketing and all that. I mean, it takes a lot to set up a movie.
Yeah.
Where you could drop a television series and if it doesn't do well, you can just kind of bury it, basically. I mean, honestly, the whole blowback that we're getting from The Acolyte, and some of this other stuff probably wouldn't have been as bad if there had been theatrical releases all this time. Because you have a theatrical.
They were good.
Well, as long as they were, assuming they were good.
Okay.
Assuming they were good. Yeah, I mean, it's true because then that would really be bad. But I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Assuming that movies that they're making are good, you get a series that, maybe only appeals to a small demographic, or it just isn't done well. You could bury that because you have other things going. In a lot of ways, they can almost do that because, okay, The Acolyte kind of sucked, but hey, look, Skeleton Crew was good. Now, granted, nobody really watched it apparently, but for those people who did, including a lot of the really famous YouTube, critics of Star Wars, people that are just shredding it constantly, they all love Skeleton Crew with good reason. So I think they just have to really be careful. And once again, it's just going to take some time. But I don't know. I'm not going to make any assumptions about this project yet because I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's definitely too early to tell. And like I said, even though Shawn Levy, who was the director for Wolverine and Deadpool, we know what kind of movie that was, but, that doesn't mean that that's all he can do. That's just...
Right. Like, I'll put it like this. I would be a lot more willing to give him room for interpretation than, say, Taika Waititi.
Yeah.
Because...
Or Ragnarok.
Right. And I mean, those are the type of movies he just seems to make, and I think he would actually bring Star Wars into that comedic realm. which could be good, could be bad. It's like, okay, if it's more like Ragnarok, cool. I could, as long as we were getting other things, I would be okay with that. If it was like Love and Thunder, then maybe not so much. But only time will tell, because like I said, the Rey movie is, once again, it should be called the Disarray movie.
Yeah. I just think, I think that what needs to happen, and this is the gospel according to Daryl, chapter 5, verses 7 through 9. I think that what they need to focus on is fixing the lore and the canon first. Like, let's clear the palette. Let's get that back on schedule. Let's make it good. Let's polish that up. And then, okay, once that's been successful and we've gotten Star Wars back to its, top tier, gleaming,
kind of like position. The droids at the end of all the movies.
Exactly. Now we can start doing all this other stuff. But I think if you're trying to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, it just seems so like you guys are all over the place and you don't know where you want to go with your franchise. Because if you're trying to do, okay, we don't want to do a comedy thing over here, but then we just want to do a war movie over here, and then, what if we did a romance thing over here? It's like, I'm not saying you can't do that, but when your main, I guess your main brand is faulty, you got to fix that, first. Then start doing all this stuff. So let's figure out, like, okay, that's what I think. That's why I'm excited for the James Mangold thing. Like, okay, if you do this whole Dawn of the Jedi thing, and that's done, like, that's a great concept, a fabulous concept. If you do it right, that could set a great precedence for future movies, not just in that era of Star Wars, but I'm saying, okay, we're back in the theaters. We got a great project out. It's beloved by everybody. People want more of this type of, storytelling, writing, all that type of stuff. Let's put out 3 or 4 good films like that, kind of match that that energy, shall we say. And then, okay, now let's just experiment with one TV show. Let's just get all the minds together, make sure if it's going to be a comedy, make sure it feels like Star Wars, but it's really good and it has that Star Wars humor. Let's keep the main thing the main thing.
Well, and in addition to that,
now we can start moving forward.
Yeah. Because the other problem is, like, look, pick an era. I'm not saying not make multiple eras, but make it make sense, right? Okay, you got Mangold doing the old Republic thing, basically.
Right.
All right, fine. Get the continuity straightened out first. Get some of the stuff, like, pick eras that you're going to, that makes sense. But, again, who knows? All right, another newer person, the Dark Jedi writes, cast actors that make sense to the characters. That's another, exactly. Whether their name or not. Jude Law made a lot of sense to, John on the Wood, right? I mean, it's like you could see that. I mean, when Ian McDiarmid was chosen to play the Emperor, it's like a perfect casting. And that's another thing. In a lot of the earlier Star Wars things,
oh yeah,
the casting was great. There wasn't hardly anybody that was miscast. You might have a few people here and there, but I mean, for the most part, that's cool. Even the sequel trilogy. I mean, I know one of the things I remember you were always saying is that why are you getting Benicio del Toro to play that character? We all thought, I mean, you look at him and you're thinking like, man, I remember all the speculation we had at the time. Oh, he's going to play the Sith Lord, or he's going to play,
yeah, some
like
weird
pirate
guy or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess he kind of was.
That's what it was.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the funny thing. He actually playing a slicer was actually cool, because that was one of the expanded universe things that was brought into canon. The problem is that they didn't do it correctly, I guess would probably be the best way to put it. All right, David says, head-to-head understands Star Wars better than the people getting the checks. You all have a better approach and vision for the future than the company. Poor leadership on their part. Well, I think you'd find a lot of people do, because it seems like, I don't know, it seems like fans like us, people that are still, we're still right there with the franchise, right? We're to the bitter end. We're like the band playing on the Titanic.
I was just about to say that. It's like that Obi-Wan and Anakin moment.
Yeah, I was about to say that. If you want a Star Wars reference, we're like in Revenge of the Sith. Was it? Was that the one? Yeah.
Yep.
We're still flying half a ship. It's like the whole ship is like blown apart, but we're still there piloting that thing, right? I mean, we're there till the bitter end. But the thing is, I think that just like the theme of a lot of Star Wars, right? Hope. There's always hope, because it's fixable. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily beyond redemption. It just has to get into somebody's hands. All right, let me get David back here. He says, Skeleton Crew could have casted Donald Glover instead of Jude, right, Daryl? Because Donald has so much range.
Oh, here he goes trolling.
He's trolling you. And hey, I'm a huge fan of Donald Glover, man. I'm telling you, if you haven't watched Community, you shouldn't be saying anything. You watch every season of Community. It's a fantastic show, by the way. It's probably one of the funniest comedies. It's quirky, but it's one of the funniest comedies ever written. But that said, I don't even necessarily think that casting is a lot of their problem. I think it's what they do with those people. What do they do with the actors? What do they do with the characters?
And what's the story that
they're in? Exactly.
Because, to David's favorite, I forgot the actor's name now, but Balin Skull, phenomenal actor, know, and he did a phenomenal job in Ahsoka.
Ray Stevenson, I think.
Ray Stevenson, yep. Did a phenomenal job, God rest him. But the thing is that, but then you have someone like Rosario Dawson, who's a phenomenal actress, but you don't utilize her the way you should, and because you're telling the story. Almost half the first season is through the eyes of Sabine.
Yeah, the show should have been called Sabine.
Exactly. So it's just like it's kind of hard to, and then now you're not really utilizing Rosario to her credit. So, and the show was named after her character. We're not getting, and that's what we mean by like dropping the ball on certain things.
Well, it's like I always say, man, you want the best drinking in the world. Every time Ahsoka crosses her arms, take a drink, you'll be obliterated like multiple times in each episode. David says, I don't watch bad shows. Yeah, see, that's the thing. Although that's good, because you do watch us every week, so I guess we can take that as a compliment.
Absolutely.
But yeah, even going back to the Dark Jedi's point, right? I mean, you do have to make sure that if you're going to put these name actors in, that it is appropriate to the character, because even though we've been talking about thus far, they've, for the most part, handled it correctly. If they are starting to get desperate, like, okay, now we're going to have to start consciously bringing in name actors for that reason, because they have a name. Now you do run the risk of them just shoehorning in an actor, because most of the time it's because these guys want to be in it, right? I mean, Sam Jackson was just like, dude, make me a stormtrooper. I don't care. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Daniel Craig did it, right? So just right where I was going with that. Daniel Craig wanted to do it. So they're like, all right, cool. We'll make you a first order trooper.
But, you take something like, for example, in Rogue One. Forrest Whitaker, I don't think you needed him to play Saw Gerrera in that. Now, unless you plan on unless you want to establish him as Saw Gerrera because you're going to do more projects with him prior to Rogue One.
They are.
Okay.
He's going to be in Andor season 2.
Right. Now, see, that makes sense. If that was, but I'm saying if that was the plan all along, I don't think that was the plan all along. I think that's.
I don't know.
Like,
it may have been. He was a big time Clone Wars guy. I mean, in a way.
Well, no, the character of Saw Gerrera is fine. What I'm saying is.
Nah, I mean, I don't think Forrest Whitaker was the right guy to even play him.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and that was to my point was, I don't think you needed Forrest Whitaker to play him. I think honestly, I mean, if he wasn't such a good Lando, I could say Donald Glover could have played a good Saw Gerrera.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of an actor that would have been more like, because you got to remember how Saw Gerrera was in the Clone Wars.
He was so militant and so. Yeah.
He was. I mean, he was like, he wasn't at all like Forrest Whitaker, like not even a little bit. And it's. Now granted, if you're trying to reinterpret the character, I don't have a problem with the way Forrest Whitaker played him, really. I mean, it's like, okay, they changed the character. They did that to somebody else, too. Oh, man, it was another Rogue One guy, actually.
Honestly, you know who'd have been? If they wanted to get I'll put it to you this way. If they wanted to get a name actor to play Saw Gerrera, Wesley Snipes.
That would have been good.
Wesley Snipes would have definitely.
No, that would have been, yes. That would have been, that would have been more in line.
Yep.
Exactly. And then David says, I was referring to Community. I know. We know you were referring to Community. But as much as we hated that, the fact that you watch us, and since you say you don't watch bad shows, but, again, Community is really good. Oh yeah, this is a good one. I think Denzel would have been a great Saw Gerrera. Yeah, he would have. Now that.
Oh, of course.
That's spot on.
Man. I mean, Denzel.
No, that's spot on casting right there. That's like Saw Gerrera jumping off of the, animated thing and just being the live action. That's like the Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka thing. Yes. Because you need the gravitas, but you need, that would have been perfect. But again, I don't necessarily have a problem with the way that Forrest Whitaker, if you're saying, okay, look, we're going to reimagine the character a little bit for live action. Man, I wish I could remember who it was that they did. They lifted from the Clone Wars series, and it was like the way that they were portrayed in the Clone Wars was vastly different. And then they ended up rewriting the character in future episodes of the Clone Wars to be more like the actor that played whatever the character was in the movie. I just don't remember who it was. But, they could have done something like that with Saw Gerrera too. But you're right. I mean, you didn't need, you don't need that necessarily. Yeah. You could have gotten away with an actor that isn't well known at all, or maybe is completely unknown. But here's the point that I think that really brings us home is the fact that you have two different things. Number one, the main thing is don't bring a name actor in for the sake of bringing a name actor in. Make sure they're actually fitting the material that you have. So if you have the choice, it's almost like, you have like a Saw Gerrera thing where you're kind of like, who would be good for this? Denzel would be good for this. So then you bring him in, and you bring in the fans and, people that maybe not otherwise would see a Star Wars movie will see it because they're in it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of why Forrest Whitaker was probably cast. Because he's an award-winning actor, too.
Of course, yeah.
So they probably rewrote it a little bit like, hey, this is the direction we're going. We think this guy would be good. He's got a name. It's going to bring an audience. Fine.
That's what I'm saying. Like the role that Saw Gerrera played in Rogue One, you didn't need Forrest Whitaker for.
No.
Because you didn't get a chance. It's not like Forrest Whitaker got a chance to give you Forrest Whitaker. You see what I'm saying? Like,
right.
If you're going to bring him in, like, for example, Denzel, I agree, he's the GOAT. But again, if you're going to bring him in to deliver the lines and the stuff that he did, now maybe Denzel would have, maybe that he would have delivered it, or they would have had him deliver it more impactfully, some of the stuff. But I still would feel like it would have been a waste just to bring Denzel in for that. If you're going to bring him in, like, give us Denzel.
Well, it depends though, because even in the case of Forrest Whitaker, his portrayal of Saw was very impactful for as few lines as he had. Like, you remember it. It's memorable. I mean, is it needed? No. And, more to the point, you probably could have saved a lot in the budget by not bringing in somebody like him. But who knows? Now, Ronaldo says, when anybody except Keanu Reeves is Revan, I would. I mean, I'm trying to think of how old Revan is.
John Wick.
I mean, he could, because Revan does kind of have that John Wick look going for him. And I mean, as long as he could pull it off, I mean.
He's in the mask half the time anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, wouldn't matter.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. The only problem that I would have is if it's a project where you're just going to feature him in live action and it's a one and done thing, fine. But you also have to think about the future, Eckhart.
Think about the future, Jack.
Another Star Wars alum, our friend Porkins.
Porkins.
Good old William Hookins. But I think that you have to think about, you can't get somebody who's, older if you plan on making a ton of movies with that person. Like, if you're going to bring Revan in and, continue that, and you want to make like 10 or 15 years worth of films with this character, well, then you better get the AI thing out, Start like mocapping Keanu Reeves now and, get his voice all AI'd up and, just do that if you want to go that direction. If not, you got to get somebody younger. Because that was what was supposed to happen with Solo, right? They had Donald Glover as Lando. And, of course, that series is still threatening to be made.
Mm-hmm.
You had Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. So it was like they were going to make like 2 more movies. There was going to be some spin-off stuff. Okay, that makes sense. Recast, right? Because you could de-age Harrison Ford. Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Amelia Clark is going to be in that.
Yeah. His Akira character is amazing. David says, Thrawn was an example of horrible casting. He was an atrocious pick. First, I was going to say he was an atrocious prick. I read that wrong at first.
That's hilarious.
I don't know who in their right mind would cast a guy that could barely move to be such a grade A Thanos-level villain. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he voiced the animated version of the character.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they were trying to keep the continuity. I mean, yeah, we wanted, Benedict Cumberbatch, I think, was like our number one choice. We did a show on that, by the way. Yep. Who should be cast as Thrawn?
Michael Fassbender.
Yep. Fassbender would have been another great one. Ronaldo says, I agree with the problem of the age. However, we know he was almost cast as Master Saul, and he still has the door open for Star Wars. So maybe. But don't forget that Master Saul was an older character, too.
Mm-hmm.
He could have played that, and it would have been fine. You get somebody like Revan. Revan's got a history.
You could have understood him. I'm sorry. Sorry. So sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you have to learn a language for a role, right?
Exactly. Like, all right, break out the Rosetta Stone real quick. And
would have been great if Kamira just kept going like, what? What are you saying?
Should have had Chris Tucker. Do you understand the words?
It's like, I'll tell you what, man, just write it down. I'll read it.
Right. He just holds up a sign.
Exactly. Oh, man. But I mean, this is a lot. Like I said, there's a lot to this. This show has gone on like a half hour longer than most of our shows because, well, number one, because you guys are chatting so great. But the other reason is because this is a really weighty, meaty type of discussion. Because there's again, you can find examples in Star Wars where they have done name actors and where they haven't. And it's like, do they need it? I think ultimately we could say you don't need them. You might want them where it's appropriate. I think it probably helps in some cases, and it probably detracts in other cases. And as a filmmaker, you just have to be really on point, or actually really more so as a casting director, you have to be on point as far as, goes back to what you said at the beginning of the show. What does the story call for? What does it need?
Mm-hmm.
Or who does it need?
Yeah, in this case, yeah. Right.
And then if you feel like, okay, maybe it's worth it to get a name actor for this, then you do it. You go for it. Otherwise, I think you're fine, and probably not, especially now. Maybe earlier when you were trying to establish Star Wars, it would make more sense. But I think now you can probably get away with it. And in fact, in some ways, it might be preferable, because then you're not distracted. You're really absorbed. You believe that this person is a character. And again, I mean, as long as they have the chops to pull it off, that's a necessity too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I
agree.
Okay. Well, there you go. Those are our final thoughts. Ted basically says, fun discussion tonight, guys. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
This is a good one.
Enjoyed yourself.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for a longer episode of Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. So, hopefully you guys join us next time, whenever that may be. You know us. Our schedule is always in flux. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Definitely hit that notification bell if you want to be alerted to when we go live. So until next time, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.